welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. We should be running for about an hour and a half, but we'll take it as it comes, but round about 9 o'clock. We've got 4 videos to share with you tonight, and we'll have a question and answer session between each of the videos, I think, and also a general one at the end as well to finish off the evening. Can I firstly introduce Graham Elder here, and welcome him along tonight. He's going to, once we get on to the first video, which is an introduction that fully introduces himself, so I'll not make any more to do. I'll hand over to the first video.
Hello and welcome to Chapel Farm. We're situated in East Lothian, 20 miles east of Edinburgh and about 3 miles south of North Berwick. It's a family farm, 230 hectares, all organic. It's been in the family since the 1950s. It was a traditional East Lothian arable farm. We grew principally grain, some potatoes, and then we fattened livestock as well. That kind of changed. In the 90s, I was new to the game at that time and trying to find a way forward, and the 90s were difficult. Grain prices were probably at their lowest ever at that time, and we were looking for something different. So that was really where we started looking for alternatives. I felt the opportunities for expansion were fairly limited at the time, so the other route was to increase our output one way or another. So that kind of interested us in organics, and at that time we got involved with growing organic vegetables, organic potatoes, and organic grain, obviously. So we started that process in 2000, and I think we had the whole farm organic by 2006, I think. The business is a family partnership involving myself and my son Angus, who's not available today, and we also have full-time staff. On top of that, we have a manager, we have 2 tractormen, and we also have 5 cabbage pickers, processors as well.
I think I forgot to kind of say to everybody about asking questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, if they can maybe put them in the chat, and we'll forward them on to Graham. But while folk are just thinking of the first question, I'll maybe strike off by saying you talked about it taking maybe 6 years to convert, Graham. So you must have gone in for converting in sections. How did you find that, or how would you advise? Would you advise folk to go for different sections, or?
We actually started with one field just to see how it would go. My father was quite sceptical at the time, so it really was a toe in the water job. But once we got going, we were kind of more comfortable with what we were doing, and I think we made the commitment after 3 or 4 years just to put the whole thing in. Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably, there is a sort of common sense to doing it in stages. It's quite a sharp learning curve, so you don't want to make all your mistakes over the whole farm straight away. I certainly for us it suited, and it also got our rotation moving to, we'll come to the rotation in one of the next videos, but it meant that, we had to go through a fertility building phase, and had we done that, it virtually would have put the whole farm into fertility building at the time. So, it made more sense just to come in gradually and introduce, so you had a rotation right from the start. So really, we didn't think about it too much at the time, but I think it was kind of logical as well. So that seemed to be the best thing to do.
Good, thank you. I should have said I've got Craig Bothwell, my colleague, in the background here, kind of showing stuff. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom now, but in case you're not, I don't know whether, Craig, do you want to put up the second slide that shows the chat function box? Everybody should have the banner across the bottom of their screen that shows with the chat, and you can type in your questions there. Thank you. If there's no questions at the moment, we'll maybe go on to the second video, which talks more about rotations and the various crops that Graham grows.
Of the 230 hectares, I mean, and basically it's split down into a 7-year rotation. We'll have 2 years of grass clover fertility building. We'll then generally go into a vegetable crop, followed by a potato crop, followed by a cereal, then a legume, usually beans, and the 7th and final year is usually a cereal again. So it kind of breaks down into 3 phases of fertility building, high value crops, and then grain crops. The vegetable crops that we grow, they're all winter harvested vegetables. So our growing season is from April through to August, and our harvesting season starts in August and ends in March, hopefully, or possibly into April with some things. The crops that we grow, potatoes are our main one obviously, carrots, parsnips, onions, leeks, a range of cabbages, beetroot and kale, swede and celeriac. So that's just about them all, but they're all winter harvest. Some things we can harvest in the store in November time and bring them out of cold stores thereafter, but the bulk of it has to be harvested fresh. So we are harvesting all winter pretty much on a daily basis. Our fertility building periods is predominantly grass and clovers. We also throw in some herbs, plantain and chicory. It's a range of grasses, mid to late season grasses, some cocksfoot as well, along with the clovers. We have to use our first year of fertility building, we have to use the spring of that to try and control some of our weed issues. So we're generally not sowing grass until sometimes June, July, May, June, July, depends on the field, depending on what problems we're dealing with. But if we're dealing with perennial weeds, that is our opportunity within our rotation to really give them a bit of a fright. So generally sown in the summer of the first year, that goes through, we graze lambs, organic lambs coming in from elsewhere on a bed and breakfast basis. That's quite useful, it helps tidy up the swards, any weed issues, and also obviously you've got the nutrient value of the livestock as well. So that's the kind of first winter. Comes out in the spring, we don't graze anything. Often sheep can be on with us until into May. So from then through the summer months, we're purely just topping on demand as we require. And then further lambs come in for the second winter, and they carry right through to probably February, March time, where we start thinking about preparing ground for vegetable crops thereafter. So it's not a full 2-year rotation. Sometimes it is, sometimes we will sow grass seed in the autumn after harvest, and that gives us the full 2 years of fertility building. But it's vital that you get the attention to detail on that phase for us, because that affects the following subsequent years. So really that needs to be right. So we do try to put a fair amount of attention to that. We've had difficulty, these last 2 or 3 years have been very difficult, very dry through April, May, June with us at times, and that does create problems in terms of getting the germination in the stand that you would like. But you've got to do what you've got to do.
Welcome back, everybody. There's one question that's appeared, so I'll maybe start with that. You have somebody just wants a point of clarification there. I think, did you say you've got no livestock now? Because we're having difficulty hearing.
Oh, I see. We've no livestock of our own, but we do bring in lambs for the winter period. So, basically the fertility building phase is grazed from September, October through till April, May for 2 winters through that period. And the only other thing we graze is we do kind of try to cover crop most of the cereal ground, so we graze that as well. But that's through the same period of time. So we've no stock through the summer months.
While we're waiting for other questions coming in, can I maybe ask us why you decided not to do any summer grazing at all and just concentrate all your grazing into the winter period?
I mean, it just kind of evolved like that. We're pretty busy and focused on what we're trying to do with the vegetables. So, I've always felt it just wasn't, didn't want to divide our time up into livestock as well. So we've focused on the vegetables and we don't worry too much about the grass otherwise.
Right, there's another questions come in about, as well as the fertility building, which you've talked about, do you buy in any manure or fertilizer from elsewhere?
Not anymore, no. Right from the time we started, we have a mushroom unit not far away from us. So for a number of years, we were able to bring in mushroom compost, and we did that for probably 15 years. But we couldn't get that through certification anymore, so we no longer do that. So really, we don't really bring anything in at all now.
That's fine. There's another questions come in just about the cover crops, but I think you maybe go on to mention that later. But how late would you still consider establishing your cover crops?
Yeah, well, cover crops, and this far north, that's the difficulty with cover crops. It's about getting them in early enough to get something worthwhile on the ground. And grain harvest for us is generally in the second half of August. So usually some years you get started maybe the 20th of August, other years you may not get going until September. But we still put a cover in, but I feel it generally doesn't. If you don't get it in by the sort of 10th of September or thereabouts, you do kind of tend to struggle to get something sort of worthwhile on the ground. So, is there a cut-off point? Probably not. You can just cultivate and get a natural regeneration, and at least that's doing something also. So I would probably say there isn't a cut-off point, but you try to do what you can. Obviously, if you want a successful cover crop, I would say you need to be in by the first week in September.
And then there's a few questions all to do with weed control as well. You were talking about that you've got the weed problem, so that's why you sow the later on. But so what do you do for your weed control? And there's somebody asking, do you use creeping red fescue in your grass mix for ground cover for the weed control?
No, we haven't tried that. Is that using in your between crops? Is that where that comes into play?
Would that not be part of your grass clover, your mixture fertility building?
Could be, yeah. We haven't used that. I'm guessing that's very quick growing, is it?
It can be, yes, and it's good ground cover.
Right. Okay. Well, we haven't used that.
what was the question before?
Just how
Weed control.
Weed control, grass laying. I think they've got a bit of confusion here saying it's the second year of rotation, but you actually sort out.
Yeah,
it's late in the first, the first year.
That's right. It's the kind of start of the fertility building phase. Is our kind of opportunity to there. I mean, it's the perennial weeds that are the problem. The cooch, the thistles, and the docks. They're the three that give us bigger problems. The broadleaf weeds, occasionally you get it wrong and you've got a problem, but if you get it right the next year, they're not too bad. But it's the big three that tend to give you the most problem. So we've tried various things, and I suppose I should say this throughout that, whenever I do something like this, generally you've changed your mind again by the time you do it again the next time. So, we're on a journey and you're constantly changing what you do. You think you've got the right idea, but then you find that's not right either, so you try something else. We've tried a number of things to control those. I mean, obviously cultivations, that's where we started. And I think, to be honest, we're probably reverting to more cultivation. We've also tried fast-growing species such as buckwheat. Again, probably back to cultivations for that. So, yeah. So, cultivations are number one. You saw in that wee video, we have it's called a quick up killer.
I was going to say, is that the red machine? Because people were asking as well about the red machine that featured in the video. So
yeah, we've had one of those for about more than 10 years. We used to share one with a neighbour. It was a green one. It was just called a quick up. This now is a red one that is from CMN, I think. But it's roughly the same machine. Basically, it's a cultivator that rips and loosens the weeds, and then it's got a rotor on the rear which flicks them up onto the surface. And hopefully the idea is the die and wilt on the surface. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the best you can come up with. There we go there. So yeah, it's not, it's not a silver bullet, that's for sure, but it is quite a good machine. I think this one's slightly heavier built than the previous one that we had. We've only done one full season with this, so early days yet, but so far so good.
If I can just nip in, Graham, whereabouts in your rotation do you use that machine?
We use it in several places, but I mean, principally before we start the fertility building stage, so before, when we're finished cereals and before we go into grass. But we do also use it on stubbles within our rotation, or wherever we see the opportunity, to be quite honest. So, it'll go straight into a stubble and, put a lot of your, weeds on the surface. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question.
I see, Eileen, there's just a few other comments there. Do you want
yeah, there's just a comment about it looking like a triple K, but better, but
it's heavier than a triple K. It's more like a Teradisc, if you know what that is. They're grubber legs, effectively.
And then there was somebody wondering about reduction in earthworms. Have you ever done earthworm counts, or is it something you look at, whether
we're always conscious of it? Yeah, I mean, obviously, doing what we do is full of compromises. The very fact that we're growing vegetables and potatoes, that in terms of looking after your soil, that's not conducive to looking after your soil, winter harvesting vegetables. So there is a compromise to be had there. We've kind of been through a phase where maybe the last 3 or 4 years, we have reduced cultivations in an effort to improve soil quality. But I would need to say our weed problems have increased as a result of that. So I think probably the current thinking is we will be reverting back to more cultivations in an effort to make a better job of controlling our weeds.
I suppose it's a trade-off really between the weeds and the
Absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't cultivate if you didn't have to, but at the moment we've kind of run into 2 or 3 problems. So, I think we're going to have to do something about that.
Right, I think they're asking a follow-up about how deep you cultivate for the earthworm, for the earthworms.
For the earthworms or for the weed control?
Well, weed control, because the deeper you go, obviously you're pulling up more of the burrows. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah. No, well, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to control the weeds, you've got to go as deep as the weeds. So generally, that the cultivator that you saw, we may probably do someplace between 1 and 3 passes and continually going deeper as you do all the time. So it's not, a wee bit uncomfortable saying this, but you have to compromise at times.
Yes, it's all a compromise. Just
I was just going to jump in. I think what we need to bear in mind here is it's high value crops you're growing as well, Graham. The weed burden there is obviously going to limit your yield, and it's not a case of there's livestock in the rotation there to control your weeds throughout the summertime. I mean, the cultivations is your main. Well, it's not your only method, but it's one of the main methods.
It is.
Yeah, before we move on, could I just maybe ask, I think you mentioned you've got some herbs in with your grass mix as well. Which herbs are you finding those useful, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've been using herbs for quite a while. I mean, the main thing, it was just to help us improve soil structure. That was really what the main aim was. I think there's also benefits to the livestock. But it was really the soil structure was what we're looking to do. Chicory's very deep rooting, and it's very effective at breaking up soils, so I'm quite positive about that.
Good. And I would think you would, somebody's asking, but you're using ploughing as well as your weed control, your cultivator. You'd be using ploughing, yes.
We are indeed.
I think we'll move on now to hear a bit more about your cereals, beans and cover crops, I think in the next video.
For the cereal section of the rotation, we're predominantly spring cereals. Spring barley, spring oats, spring beans is what we've been doing in recent years. We occasionally have a crop of winter wheat that you get a different weed profile with autumn crops rather than spring crops. We have run into some problems with the spring germinating weeds, charlock and runch in particular. Most of the cereal crops are grown for seed. We're fortunate to have Dodds of Harrington not far away. Really, right from the start, that has been our main cereal market. They suggest what varieties they're looking for, and as long as we're happy with it, then that's what we'll go ahead and do. It doesn't cover all the area. At various times we've grown malton barley and also milling oats, but seed is our first port of call. It's great to have a market on your doorstep. It also can be very helpful in getting rid of half loads at the end of the day, because we can take them up ourselves if need be, because often half loads is an issue with the organic grains. In recent years we've focused on laureate barley and we were on first oats for a number of years, but we're now on Merlin for the first time this year. Beans, again, over the years, in recent times we've been on Lynx, which has been a reasonable variety. A number of years ago we were on Babylon, which was actually a better variety, but it got to the point where there was no seed available, so we had to stop growing Babylon. Big problem with beans is chocolate spot. Most years you get chocolate spot to some degree, but that's in terms of choosing a variety, some resistance to chocolate spot is absolutely essential. Some of the varieties we've had in the past took chocolate spot very early in the season and were just a disaster of a crop as a result. In terms of the oats and barley, disease tend not to be too big an issue. First oats were susceptible to mildew, that could be a problem, but on the whole, disease is not too big an issue. Weeds can be. We've been on a journey of different things in terms of controlling weeds over the years. Our preferred option at the moment is harrows. If we can get in early, that's the key point. We have tried hoeing in cereals. We have a Garford guided hoe. That works, but again, it's a slow job. It takes a lot of time. It's expensive. If you can do it with something that's broad acres, then that is much preferable. But we kind of feel we need that as a kind of fire engine situation. There's always going to be times when the weather's against you, when you want to harrow, and as a result of that, it doesn't get done, and you're in a hole. To have any kind of success with grass harrows, you need to be in very early. It's a fraught process, and you're better not to look behind. But yeah, the earlier you can get in, the better. I mean, quite often we're in at 2-leaf, which seems horrendous at the time. But if you want to control the weeds, you've got to control them at that cotyledon stage. If you wait any longer, it's not as successful. In recent years, we've tried to cover crop wherever we can. As with the principles of regenerative farming, we're looking to keep a cover on the ground as much as we can. I think it is good to have roots on the ground. We're also looking to soak up any nutrients as well, and there's also some grazing element in it also. This is a cover crop behind us following spring barley. We've been kind of around the block a bit with this. We've been at it for quite a long time, and we're actually settled on rye. We grow our own seed, maybe 1 year in 3, and then keep it on, so we've got the organic grain to use. Rye, it's as fast growing as anything else. Soaks up nutrients and gives us a bit of cover and also a bit of grazing. So that's kind of where we've settled on. We have put other things in the past. We've used mustard, turnip radish, phacelia, but we've got such a diverse rotation that all these things potentially cause us soil-borne diseases as well. So we're kind of back to just rye virtually on its own with not much else.
Can I maybe ask, Graham, we saw quite a lot of water there. Can you tell us a bit more about your irrigation and having to use the water for irrigating your crops?
Yeah, I mean, we put in an irrigation pond a number of years ago. Irrigation, for what we do, it's just about essential. I would say, certainly in the last couple of years, we seem to get these dry springs now, and in the last couple of years, we've had to irrigate virtually everything into the vegetable crops, either as putting in plants and then or sowing seeds to get them to germinate. Unfortunately, one of the things, because we're cultivating stale seed beds, etc., of course, each time you cultivate a seed bed, you lose moisture if it stays dry. So that is an ongoing issue. So it would be very risky indeed, I think, to try and do this without irrigation. So we've got the reservoir there, we've also got a borehole, and we do try, well, we use it a lot, shall we say. And again, even for a lot of the crops, we've had to, our irrigation season can start in early May and it sometimes doesn't finish until into October. A lot of the winter crops, September, October can be a key bulking period for leeks, celeriac and the like. So, it's a long season. So water's very important to us. Well, we're in a dry part of the country as well. I think I'm right in saying that Dunbar, which is just along the road, is the driest part of Scotland. So, we're not too far away from there.
Good, yes, you're a kind of better climate, I think, than some of the folk. So
Yeah, well, when you're dry and you hear everybody else getting rain, that's not
yes,
such a good
everybody
thing.
everybody complains about the weather. It's never right. Got a question here. Are all your vegetables direct sown? Are the leeks and potatoes hilled up, kind of mounded up or hilled up?
Yeah, no. Combination of plants and seeds. Roughly all the brassicas tend to be plants. The leeks tend to be plants. Onions, we do both onion sets and onion seeds. Carrots, parsnips, beetroot all tend to be seeds. So it's a split depending on the crop. Obviously, some crops don't lend themselves to plants. I mean, plants are definitely a help because it gets you ahead of the weeds. You've got this bigger plant before you can still seed bed, plant a big plant, and then you're ahead of the game. Whereas slow growing seeds, such as onions, carrots, and parsnips, it's a long haul before those crops are competitive.
Right, and there's a follow-on question. Do you buy in your seedlings or do you have your own nursery?
We buy in the seedlings, the plants. Yeah, so we get a plant raiser to raise them, and we buy in the plants.
Okay, thank you. Just changing subjects a wee bit. I was interested to know, you've kind of gone on to your rye because of the soil-borne disease, but there might be other people that maybe don't have that problem, that are maybe not growing a lot of vegetables, who would gain from your experience. What did you think of the other? You've tried a lot of things. What did you think of the other options? Or
I mean, I agree with the principles that the more species you have, the better. It's just general for us. There tends to be an issue with most species. So, and again, it's then about getting something that grows fast enough in Scotland. And that's really where rye's forming. It's soaking up nutrients, which is important. It covers ground as quickly as most things. So that's the kind of basis of it. But I think the more diversity you can have, the better. And we would certainly do that, but for our other situations. But it's about getting them growing fast enough in Scotland. A lot of the small seeds, the clovers, you sow a clover in early September. You're not going to get much out of it. I mean, it's okay if you're going to leave it till the following season and then it's there and it'll do something for you at that stage. But if you're going to put in another crop in the springtime, there's not enough time there for it to do anything useful. Or maybe there's something useful, but it's expensive seed for not very much.
for a few months. And I think you said earlier on, you do graze your cover crops. You make use of those. You graze those with the sheep as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Right, I think there don't seem to be any more questions at the moment, so I think we'll move on to look at more the potatoes and your marketing in the final video.
We're growing about 30 hectares of potatoes, predominantly for supermarket outlets through a packer, and obviously we'll sell what we can locally through our vegetable markets in 25 kilo potato bags. Varieties have evolved over a number of years. More recently, we're now using some of the better blight resistant varieties. That seems to be more important than ever. We used to be allowed to apply copper for blight control, which worked quite successfully, but I think it was 2017 that became no longer permitted. So there's been a change in that period, the kind of last 5 years, towards more blight resistant varieties. Marfona, which is kind of early maturing, has been a staple for us for a number of years, and Gatsby probably falls into the same category. So their areas are probably reducing, and there's kind of newer varieties, Twinner, Alouette, Carolus, Acoustic, all have better blight resistance, and that seems to be the direction of travel for the varieties. So, but as ever with a new variety, it takes a number of years before you're comfortable that you think it's going to be okay for all the situations. There's been a few false starts, but that's inevitable. So variety choice is always going to be key for potatoes, and obviously it needs to be acceptable to the supermarkets too. If it's not on a supermarket list, then it hasn't got a home for it, so that's no good. You've always got to be conscious of your marketing. You need a market, you need to know where that is, and you need to produce what that market needs. So we always try to do that. We also try to build a market in terms of the vegetable side of things. There's no point in producing something you can't sell. So you need to be aware of that. We try to communicate as much as possible with our customers, just so that we know what they want and hopefully we can produce it. In terms of delivering it, there's always going to be a seasonal flow to the vegetable production. There is a market for various vegetables throughout the winter. Meeting the storage, having it available when it's in demand is the key to market it. Cold stores allow you to do that to some degree. They also give you great flexibility in terms of you can broaden the period when you're selling your product. To market our vegetables, we have a number of outlets, all generally kind of smaller, but typically organic wholesalers are over various parts of the country, and we can access them using the pallet line system, whereby we fill a pallet full of vegetables and it's delivered overnight to anywhere in Britain, basically the following day. So that gives us access to organic wholesalers. Organic wholesalers are generally fairly loyal to their local suppliers. That door often doesn't open to us until later in the season, but nevertheless, it's a good market for us. Box schemes are another market for us. We don't run a box scheme ourselves, but we supply a number of people who do run box schemes. So they probably grow a percentage of the produce that they supply, and they may buy in some from us to fill in the gaps. Things like potatoes, or that take up more area that they perhaps don't have. So we supply the gaps that the box schemes have, which is good. So between that and the wholesalers, that's the bulk of our organic produce, vegetable produce, and that's mainly going away in 25 kilo bags or 10 kilo nets or that type of thing. It's about communication, speaking to people, seeing what the opportunities are, and as ever coming up with the best quality you can at that time.
I think Graham's, well,
I think you
He's
just
some-
got back early.
he summed up the ethos of marketing very well there, communication and knowing your market and quality, kind of, I think they're all very, very important things. You mentioned wholesalers and the box schemes. Do you ever sell anything direct, or is it all through wholesalers and folk that do their box schemes?
We don't really sell direct to the public, if that's what you mean. I mean, we sell to shops, restaurants, basically anybody, but we don't sell to the public.
I was just going to drop in my question there, Graham. The day I was out, it was fantastic to see well, we didn't see the harvesting process, but we've seen through the shed. How do you deal with orders, Graham, when we're talking about that with the emails and whatnot, and how do you deal with like the harvest to order sort of situation?
Orders are all by emails. I mean, some people will phone as well, which is always worthwhile. Just it helps both of us, although it's more time consuming. So generally, I mean, most people are on a weekly cycle, so we kind of know which days most people are going to order for. And general, there is certain peaks within the week, but you know, generally it's the order the day before the collect, or it's dispatched. So we're kind of working on orders quite often in by 4 o'clock in the afternoon and away by lunchtime the following day. So it's fairly tight, and at times it can be a wee bit fraught. But you know, that's what we try and do. You know, I mean, once you're into the swing of it, you kind of know, you've got a fair idea of what's coming. But there's always something that you can catch you out.
And on that, Graham, I don't think you covered it earlier. What labour have you got kind of on a day-to-day basis? Who's on farm and who's doing what?
There's myself and my son Angus. We're a manager, 2 tractormen, and then 5 shed staff. You know, so they're processing staff.
And sorry, Elaine, back to you.
I just ask as well, that processing staff, if you're just doing most of the work during the winter, what do you keep them on it, or have the other jobs in the summer, or what do?
Yeah, well, we're an all year round thing, really. See, because we start planting, you know, we maybe finish harvesting in April, and we'll start planting in May. So you know, we're at it all year, and then we're weeding throughout the summer. So quite often the only kind of month that we're quiet is August.
Right, so those kind of folk that are kind of on the packing shed would also be on planters and kind of.
Yeah. No, we can keep them busy certainly virtually all year round.
Good. Got a question here. Do you dry your onions before you store them?
Yeah, all the onions are dried. I mean, we do start selling them straight out the field, usually in August. You know, so for a few weeks, we're maybe selling something that's not dried, but throughout the rest of the year, once we start harvesting, everything's dried. So it's dried into store, and that takes us right through. Well, generally onions, we usually run out of onions about January time.
It's related about your cold store. You've talked quite a bit about storage. Have you found your cold store is necessary to the success of your business, or do you think you could go away without store, or do you really need the storage for operating a successful business?
Yeah, I mean, it makes life a whole lot easier if you can, you know, some things like swede and potatoes and onions, you know, you've got them to hand whenever you want them. So whereas there's enough things such as the carrots, the parsnips, the leeks, the cabbages, you know, that's happening on a daily basis. So they are very weather dependent, which is grief. Whereas anything that comes out of cold store is you're far more in control. So things that do store, it's a pity that more things didn't store.
Now we've got a question about waste as well. What do you do with your waste? What your vegetable waste if you're preparing it for sale?
Outgrades generally go to other organic farmers for feeding livestock, and anything sort of leafy waste is always returned to the field that it comes from. So, you know, leeks, celeriac, for example, there's a lot of that type of waste, cabbages, leaves, you know, anything like that that's green material will be returned to the field that it came from.
Good. I think that's come to about the end of the questions on the storage. So I'll just open up if anybody's got any questions on any of the aspects of the business, or looking at your business, or things that haven't been maybe thinking about that hasn't been maybe been mentioned, or stuff that they'd seen in the videos that hasn't been covered. Although I think you did quite a good job of, you did a lot of narrative kind of and you explained a lot of things as you went along. So Craig, you were out on the farm. Have you got anything that you?
Just a bit of generic question, Graham. What's your business's biggest challenge? Should have given you time to think about that one. Put you under the spot.
Biggest challenge. Well, I mean, weeds are an obvious challenge. Marketing's always a challenge. The weather is a huge challenge. You know, you're very dependent on what goes on round about you. You know, I mentioned in the video about the cereals, you know, the harrowing of cereals works quite well, but at the end of the day, the window for that is possibly only a week to 10 days. The ideal window is possibly even less than that. If that week to 10 days is pouring rain, then you've missed the boat and you can't do anything about it. So, you know, that's a definite problem. And you know, and you have that throughout. You know, at the end of the day, you are mechanical weeding can be a slow process. So whereas conventional farmers would maybe be able to cover their whole farm in a day, it'll take us a lot longer than that to achieve the same thing. So yeah, I suppose it has to be the weather.
I'll maybe ask this next question that's appeared in Alien and Graham. I can probably answer it as well. Have you done a carbon audit?
Well, you know I have, yes.
So this was a attendee asking the question. So we're just doing another one, but I suppose well, you can answer it as well, Graham. But the only point for that was that because you're so unique in what you do, and obviously every crop is there's very little benchmark of data available because of A, your organic, B, your veg. And see, there's not enough what people doing what you're doing, but so yeah, we're in the process of doing another carbon audit.
Yeah, there's a number of processes that we are doing that basically don't have a number. Yeah.
And do you get any demand for that, Graham, from any for any customers for the carbon audit? Or
I mean, obviously, supplying supermarkets that'll be part of any assurance scheme. So it's there, but that's no different from anyone else. I wouldn't say any of our wholesale customers are asking for that at the moment. I suspect there's a kind of assumption that because you're organic, you know, the big one, you're not using the fertilizer. So, but no, I think with time that'll come in more and more into it as well. We'll need to justify ourselves most of the things that we do also.
I can probably think about the answer to this, but somebody's asking why you haven't thought of setting up your own farm shop. Why you haven't set up your own farm shop?
We're not in a great location. Now that's maybe less of an issue now, but certainly a number of years ago, you always felt location was very important. We're on a bit of a back road out the way, so that's not ideal. It does bring the general public onto the farm, and again, I think you need to be set up for that. So again, I don't feel we've got a natural situation that is good for that. Unfortunately, everything's right in the middle of the farm, and all our working operations are in that area too. So we haven't gone down that route so far.
Right, this is a bit of a crystal ball, and I must admit, vegetables aren't my forte. Somebody's asking how the vegetable market price is looking going forward.
Going forward, being 3 months or 3 years. I mean, cost, labour, labour's a huge cost to us. You know, and there's like the minimum wage is going up by £1 next April. Well, that's pretty sore for some of the things that we do. You know, there's hand weeding involved in a lot of the onions, the carrots, and the parsnips. So, and the leeks. So, you know, that is, it's kind of hard to say. It's whether the market would stand the price increases. I think there's a bit of that. Yes, there is a demand. Some people will definitely be happy to pay for good, high quality food. But whether how mainstream that is, you know, I think we just have to watch the space. There will be limits to the prices of some vegetables. There's no doubt about it. And you know, so yeah, I would like to have a crystal ball to know that. That'd be very helpful.
Now, I don't think it's something actually we've covered, but somebody's asking about pest control, such as your cabbage whites and your carrot root fly. What you do about the pest control?
There's a couple of things we do. I mean, you've mentioned cabbage whites, and that definitely can be a problem. Caterpillars. There is a product. It's a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis, I think. Dipel is the trade name. So that actually works quite well in terms of controlling caterpillars. As ever, it's not just you can't spray in strong sunlight. You've got to try and get it on the undersides of the leaves. It only lasts for kind of 48 hours, particularly in strong sunlight. So, you know, there's a number of difficulties there, but if you get it right, it does work. It can be quite successful. You're able to break the life cycle of it. So often it takes 2 applications to do that, by the time you break the cycle of reproduction. So, you know, that certainly is essential, and I would say probably 8 years and 10, we will use that on the cabbages. We use nets. We've got nets for cabbage root fly. Tend not to use those in cabbages, but we do on swede. And we use them for protection as well at times. We have a winter swan population, which seem to love carrots, so we quite often have to cover carrots through the winter period once they get a taste of them. So, but I'm saying the nets we've had from the start and the dipel are probably the 2 main things that we use.
Okay. Has anybody got any other questions or? I think I've kind of
You've run dry.
through my list. Have you got anything, Craig, or?
No, I don't actually. I did just Google. There was a question come in here asking whether or not you liaise with Riverford, and I admit I had to.
Yes, I saw that, and I wasn't very sure what Riverford was. So
it's like group of organic farmers down south that must do a organic veg box delivery. So the question was, do you liaise with them, and would you ever consider doing a sort of Scottish version of that, Graham? But I think you maybe mentioned that in the veg boxes when we talked earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken to Riverford before, but clearly they're a long way away. They're based in Devon. So we have spoken to them. I mean, in many ways, there's not many others. You know, I think down in Devon there is a number of producers, and they all work together under the Riverford banner for the good of them all. There isn't so many people up in Scotland doing this kind of organic vegetables. So, but no, I mean, obviously, you'd always look at these things. There's a strength in the more of you there is a strength in that. So, but at the moment, I would say no, there's nothing going on in that respect.
Just like to kind of finish off, I was just thinking, if with all your experience, Graham, what would you, if somebody was to give, say, a bit of a, kind of what your main advice would be, anybody considering going organic or thinking about organic production, what would your bit of
Advice.
your prime bit of advice be?
Well, the simple answer is grow good crops. It's as simple as that. If you grow good crops, you minimise the problems. The weeds, they all come from errors, and some of the problems that we have today, I can say, stem from mistakes made 15 to 20 years ago. So it's difficult to go back the way once you've got a problem. I think markets is know where your produce is going, whatever it is. That anybody who's converting, I would suggest make sure you're speaking to people who are going to buy your produce before you even know it, because it's still a very small market. It's not a question of just picking up the phone once you've got your crop harvested. So market, you need to know who you're going to sell your product to.
Good bit of advice there. So
Well,
thank you very much, Graham, for being so open and giving us a lot of information there. Craig, if you maybe just want to go on to the last slide about, we've got this thing about feedback forms. The government are always very interested in hearing what feedback you have. So you should be getting a feedback form by email tomorrow, everybody that's attended. So it would be we're always very grateful for putting the information back, and you'll be entered into a kind of prize draw. They do it every month for a hamper, so there'll be a prize draw for a hamper. So please do fill out your feedback and return it. You should get an email tomorrow. But I don't think, unless there's any final questions, I would just thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Graham, for having us on for the videos and coming along tonight and answering so many questions.
well,
So
thank you.
Thanks for hosting us, Graham. It was they were really easy videos to shoot. They were a pleasure. There wasn't much work involved in editing them at all. So I think they come across really well.
Yes, and I think you gave a lot of information there. It was difficult to actually come up with questions. I think that's why there isn't maybe so many questions, because you answered you gave an awful lot of information in a lot of the videos. So, and thank you, Craig, for kind of sitting and running everything in the background. So I'll just thank everybody and wish them a good night.
Good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.